Let's go to Israel, though, and catch up again with Gerald Steinberg, who's the Professor of Politics at Bar Ilan University. Joins us live from Jerusalem. Thanks for joining us again, Gerald. Tell us about your assessment of this deal that Donald Trump has put on the table with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, this announcement, and it was a very dramatic and long statement that Trump delivered. Netanyahu was standing in the corner waiting for Trump to finish. But it is a dramatic change. It actually might bring about some change in the region, in the conflict, perhaps the release of hostages, all the hostages within 72 hours. I'll get into a minute why we have to be careful. And it totally makes a mockery of this chorus, this theater that we saw. And your prime minister was there, you just discussed that, of declaring and recognizing a non-existent Palestinian state, which had absolutely zero impact, provided nothing of significance. On the contrary, it was counterproductive. Will the Trump plan, the 20 or 21-point plan, actually bring about a fundamental change? Well, I'm a little bit cautious, skeptical. Israelis are. Until the hostages are seen, until they are released, there's no deal. And Hamas has said, we're studying the plan. And usually what that means is they're going to ask for changes, they're going to demand changes. And the key issue here is Qatar. That's why the Netanyahu-Qatar phone conversation engineered by Trump was so important. If Qatar squeezes Hamas, they're the only friends they've got, is Qatar, except Iran, of course, which is powerless to help them right now. So if Qatar, the Emir of Qatar, the royal family of this dictatorship in the oil-rich dictatorship in the corner of the Middle East, says to Hamas, you got to comply or we're throwing you all out and cutting off the lifeline, we may actually see some movement on this.
Yeah, that would be welcome if that pressure led to any change. Of course, it does sound very much like an ultimatum rather than the peace deal. It's an ultimatum to Hamas to agree to this or face that final onslaught in Gaza City. Here's Benjamin Netanyahu on what's at stake here.
All these goals must be achieved because we didn't fight this horrible fight, sacrifice the finest of our young men to have Hamas stay in Gaza and threaten us again and again and again with these horrific massacres.
Gerald, one way or another, whether they accept this deal, lay down their arms and disappear, they're going to go according to this ultimatum from Benjamin Netanyahu.
That's the reason that there's a chance that Hamas will now, maybe reluctantly, be forced to accept the terms of the deal, to release the hostages, to at least go through the motion of disarming, is because Israel's maintaining this huge military pressure. The fact that the Israeli army is in the middle of the last stronghold that Hamas has, Gaza City, and moving forward in dismantling the Hamas infrastructure underneath the hospitals, underneath the tall towers that are supposedly residential buildings, all of that. Hamas is every day being reduced in its capabilities, and therefore they have to make that decision. And they say they're studying the plan. Again, I think it's important that Qatar squeezes them even more. If they don't, you're right, the war will continue. Unfortunately, it will be very hard to get the hostages back unless Hamas agrees, because they are basically human shields. If Israel finds them, Hamas will kill them. So it's a very, very delicate situation for the hostages. But the bigger picture, the long-term political picture, is there will be no more Hamas. Either it will be dismantled by Israel, or it will be dismantled by this international commission that Trump is going to be the head of, this board. But basically it means that they will then work with Israel to force the removal of all Hamas capabilities. I want to point out one quick thing. About a year ago, we had this conflict where Israel took down all of the Hamas, all the Hezbollah, rather, in Lebanon capabilities. Now, there's some left. They have lots of storehouses of weapons and missiles. There's a ceasefire. And yet, every single day, Israel is destroying more and more of the remaining Hezbollah capability and the military personnel, the commanders, because the ceasefire said there will be no more threats to Israel. Hamas has not disarmed, so Israel's doing it. We may see a similar scenario with Hamas in Gaza, as we saw in Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Gerald, thanks so much for joining us. Gerald Steinberg there, live from Jerusalem.